The sand tasted like copper and ash. That was the first thing wrong about Epsilon Mortis. The second thing was how my teeth hurt when I looked at the ruins on the horizon. Not ached, hurt. Like they were trying to vibrate out of my skull at frequencies that shouldn't exist. My name is Sergeant Marcus Thane, and I knew we were all dead the moment I saw those ruins. Not dead like killed in combat, dead like already corpses, just too stupid to stop moving yet. I'd seen these structures before. 3 years ago on Taros, 4 during the NECRON incursion. The architectural patterns that made your eyes water if you stared too long. The proportions designed for beings who perceived reality in ways human brains weren't meant to process. I'd watched my entire platoon get flayed to atoms by green lightning that day. Watched the Gauss weapons take them apart, one molecule at a time, while they screamed and kept screaming even after there wasn't enough of them left to have lungs. Sergeant Thane, your concerns are noted and dismissed. Tech Priest Meridian's voice buzzed through the Vox with that mechanical certainty I'd learned to hate during this expedition. Auspec's readings show no active power signatures, no thermal emissions, no electromagnetic activity beyond baseline cosmic radiation. This site is dormant. Dormant. The word hung in the thin atmosphere of Epsilon Mortis like a lie waiting to be told. Nothing about these ruins was dormant. They were just sleeping, and sleep is different from dead. The expedition consisted of 12 personnel, 8 Mechanicus adepts led by Tech Priest Meridian, 3 security contractors hired by the Explorator team to handle physical threats while they searched for STC fragments, and me. Rogue trader Cassandra Vale had purchased my contract from the Imperial Guard after the Taros 4 disaster. She needed experienced personnel who understood Xenos threats. What she got was a veteran who woke up screaming 3 nights out of 5 and couldn't look at anything green without flinching. The preliminary survey is complete, Meridian announced through his vocal synthesizer. Subsurface scans indicate extensive underground structures, approximately 3 kilometers in depth, multiple chamber systems. Preservation state appears excellent despite estimated age of 60 million standard years. 60 million years. The number meant nothing to human consciousness. We can't comprehend that kind of time. But I'd seen what survived that long. Machines that predated human civilization by eons. Constructs built when our ancestors were fish crawling onto land for the first time, and those machines still functioned with perfection that put Imperial technology to shame. The sun setting over Epsilon Mortis wasn't really a sun. It was a dying red giant in its final death throes. The light it cast across the desert was wrong. Too red, too dim. Shadows fell at angles that didn't match the light source. When I mentioned this to the other contractors, they laughed, said combat stress had scrambled my perceptions. Maybe they were right, or maybe they just hadn't learned to recognize the warning signs yet. We made camp on the surface that first night. Standard procedure called for establishing a secure perimeter before attempting entry to unknown structures. The Mechanicus team set up their equipment while we contractors erected prefabricated shelters and deployed automated defense turrets. Everything according to protocol. Everything professional. My chrono said it was 2200 hours local time, but when I looked at it again 5 minutes later, it said 2157. I checked the device. Ran diagnostics. Everything functioned normally. I didn't mention the discrepancy to anyone. Didn't want them thinking I was losing my mind, even though I probably was. Temperature on Epsilon Mortis dropped fast after dark, from 40 degrees Celsius to -20 in less than an hour. But the cold didn't come from the air. It came from the ground, from below, rising up through the sand like breath from lungs that had been holding it for millions of years. "Are you cold, Sergeant?" That was Adept Cress, one of the younger Mechanicus personnel. She had mechanical augments covering half her face, optic implants that glowed faint red in the darkness. My thermal sensors registered temperature well within acceptable parameters for human survival. "I know," I said. "I'm cold anyway." She processed this statement for several seconds, her biological brain trying to reconcile sensor data with subjective experience. Then she made a notation on her data slate and returned to her work without further comment. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the ruins. Even with my eyes open, I saw them. The afterimage burned into my retinas like staring at the sun. Geometries that hurt to perceive. Angles that suggested doors into spaces that shouldn't exist. The next morning, we discovered the entrance. It wasn't hidden, wasn't buried, it was just there. A perfectly circular opening in the desert floor approximately 40 meters in diameter. Smooth edges that showed no erosion despite 60 million years of exposure. The interior dropped straight down into darkness that our lights couldn't penetrate. "Magnificent," Meridian breathed through his vocal synthesizer. "Preservation state exceeds all projections. The material composition appears to be a necrodermis alloy, self-repairing at the molecular level. This alone represents technology beyond current Imperial capability." He wasn't wrong. I'd seen necrodermis before. Living metal that could repair itself, reshape itself, the stuff of nightmares rendered in material science that violated every law of physics we understood. On Taros 4, I'd shot a Necron warrior 11 times with my last rifle. Watched it fall, watched it stand back up. Watched the holes in its metal body close like flesh healing, except flesh doesn't flow like liquid mercury while remaining solid. "We proceed with entry immediately," Meridian ordered. "Full documentation protocol. Record everything." We descended on grav lifts, mechanical platforms that lowered us into the shaft with the slow inevitability of coffins being lowered into graves. The darkness swallowed us meter by meter, our helmet lamps casting circles of illumination that revealed walls of seamless black metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. 200 meters down, the air changed, became thicker, harder to breathe even though oxygen readings remained normal. It wasn't the composition that had changed. It was something else. Something my instruments couldn't measure because human science didn't have names for what lived in this darkness. 400 meters, 600 meters. The shaft descended with perfect vertical precision. No deviation, no imperfection. Just endless falling through space carved from the planet's crust with technologies we barely understood existed. At 800 meters, we reached the first chamber. The walls opened outward into a space so vast our lights couldn't find the far side. The ceiling disappeared into darkness overhead. The floor stretched away into black infinity in every direction. And everywhere, we could see them. Alcoves. Thousands of them, tens of thousands, each one containing a standing figure of black metal. Necron warriors in perfect stasis. Their skeletal forms frozen mid-step like they'd been paused in the middle of marching to war 60 million years ago. "By the Omnissiah," someone whispered. I couldn't tell who. Might have been me. Meridian moved forward with the confidence of someone who had never faced these horrors in combat. His mechadendrites extended from his back, multiple mechanical tendrils tipped with various instruments, Auspex scanners, sample collectors, recording devices. He approached the nearest alcove without hesitation. "Don't touch anything," I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears, like I was speaking from the bottom of a well. "Your concern is noted, Sergeant. However, preliminary scans indicate a complete system dormancy. These constructs are in full stasis. They pose no active threat during examination." He reached out with one mechadendrite, the tip extended toward the Necron warrior's chest, where its heart would be if it had a heart, if it had ever been anything organic. The metal touched metal with a sound like a bell ringing underwater. Nothing happened. Meridian made a satisfied sound through his vocal synthesizer. See? Completely dormant. These warriors have been inactive for millions of years. Their power systems are offline, their neural matrices suspended. They are as harmless as statues. He was correct. For exactly 14 more seconds, he was correct. Then the Necron's eyes opened. Not like human eyes opening. There were no lids to lift, no biological mechanisms involved. The eye sockets simply began to glow. Sickly green light that pulsed with a rhythm that reminded me of a heartbeat, except our hearts don't beat in stuttering, irregular patterns that make you nauseous to watch. The light flickered, surged, dimmed, flared again, like a lamp with faulty wiring. The Necron's head turned toward Meridian with jerking mechanical movements, each degree of rotation accompanied by sounds that metal shouldn't make. Grinding, clicking, something that might have been screaming if screams could be translated into frequencies of tortured metal. Fascinating, Meridian said. The construct is attempting reactivation, but appears to be experiencing significant system errors. The awakening protocol is incomplete. Note the irregular energy output, the uncoordinated motor function. This unit's neural matrix has clearly suffered degradation during the extended stasis period. The Necron's arm rose. Slowly, with terrible grinding sounds like bones breaking inside steel, the hand extended toward Meridian. Fingers spread, and in that hand formed a weapon. Green energy crackling into existence with a sound like reality itself being torn. I grabbed Meridian's shoulder, pulled him back, hard. The Gauss weapon discharged where he'd been standing. The beam hit the floor, and the floor began to scream. That's the only way I can describe it. The metal floor made sounds like a dying animal as the Gauss energy struck it. Molecular bonds dissolved. Atomic structures came apart. The solid necrodermis transformed into vapor that glowed green in the darkness. But the process was wrong. The weapon malfunctioned. The energy flickered, dissipated, flared again. The disintegration spread in random patterns instead of clean lines. The Necron took a step forward. Its leg moved, stopped, moved again, like it was trying to remember how to walk. The motion was all wrong. Stuttering, mechanical. It took 3 seconds to complete a single step that should have taken one. "Fall back," I shouted. "Everyone back to the grav lifts, now!" But we were already too late, because the Necron's awakening had triggered something else. All around the chamber, the lights were coming on. Thousands of pairs of eyes opening in the darkness. Thousands of ancient warriors trying to remember how to kill. The first one to achieve full mobility was Adept Cress. She didn't run. She couldn't run. Her legs had stopped responding to her brain's commands. She stood there making confused sounds while her augmented optics recorded everything with mechanical precision. Documented her own death for whatever archive would eventually review her remains. The Necron warrior reached her in 3 steps, each one smoother than the last, as its neural matrix remembered its programming. Its hand touched her chest, not aggressive, almost gentle. The Gauss weapon activated, and Cress came apart, not exploded, not disintegrated. Came apart, atom by atom, layer by layer. I watched her skin peel away in sheets of matter so thin they were transparent, watched muscle tissue separate from bone in perfectly even slices, watched bones themselves dissolve into component minerals. The process took 43 seconds. I know because I counted. Couldn't stop counting. Couldn't stop watching even though every instinct screamed at me to look away. She was still alive for 31 of those seconds, still making sounds, still trying to understand what was happening to her. Her augmented optics recorded everything until the Gauss beam reached her skull and transformed neural tissue into dissociated particles. Run! I grabbed the nearest person, hauled them toward the grav lifts. Get to the surface. Move. Move. The chamber had become a nightmare. Necron warriors emerging from their alcoves with movements that ranged from smooth precision to horrible stuttering spasms. Some stepped out normally, others fell. Rose. Fell again. Their reanimation protocols trying to execute but failing. Succeeding. Failing again in endless loops that created bodies that died and resurrected and died again without ever truly living. One Necron materialized halfway through the floor. Its lower body phased into solid stone while its upper torso remained free. It thrashed, reached, the living metal of its form flickering between solid and translucent states. Between here and somewhere else. Between now and then, it made sounds that might have been screams if mechanical throats could scream. I shot it. Point-blank range with my last rifle set to maximum output. The energy beam struck its skull, burned through the necrodermis. For 1 second, I thought I'd actually destroyed it. Then the wound began to close. Living metal flowing like water to repair the damage. But the repair was wrong. Imperfect. The skull sealed itself back together in a shape that wasn't quite what it had been. Asymmetrical. Warped. The thing turned toward me, its eyes glowing brighter, brighter, so bright I couldn't look at them directly without my vision burning white at the center. It raised its weapon. The Gauss energy formed, dissipated, formed again, never quite achieving the stable field necessary to fire. Behind me, someone screamed. I turned, saw Adept Helix pinned by 2 Necron warriors whose movements were perfectly synchronized. They held him between them, not attacking, just holding, examining, like they were trying to remember what living flesh was, what it felt like, what it did. One of them touched his face, gently, almost curiously. Where the metal fingers touched, skin blackened, blistered, not from heat, from something else. The touch of matter that had been dead for 60 million years, making contact with flesh that still lived. The contrast was incompatible. Helix's skin died on contact. Necrosis spreading from the point of touch in patterns that looked almost like circuit diagrams etched in dead meat. Then the Necron's hand phased, went translucent, and passed through Helix's skull. I watched his eyes go wide. Watched realization hit. The metal hand solidified inside his brain, displaced biological tissue with impossible matter. His body convulsed, jerked, every muscle firing at once as his nervous system tried to process signals from neurons that no longer existed. The Necron withdrew its hand. Helix fell. But he didn't die. His augmented systems kept his body functioning even after his brain had been partially replaced with foreign matter. He lay on the floor twitching, making sounds that weren't quite words, wasn't quite screaming, something between the two that suggested a consciousness trapped in meat that no longer fully belonged to it. I ran, not brave, not tactical, just ran. Pure animal panic taking over higher brain functions. My legs carried me toward the grav lifts without conscious thought. Other survivors ran with me. Meridian, 3 contractors, 4 Mechanicus adepts, less than half our team still mobile. The rest left behind in the chamber with the awakening horrors. We reached the lifts, piled onto the platforms with none of the careful procedure we'd used descending. The platforms rose. Too slow, far too slow. I could see the Necrons below us, hundreds of them now, moving through the chamber with terrible purpose. Some walked normally, others crawled. Some stood in place, repeating the same motion endlessly, reaching for enemies who weren't there, fighting wars that had ended millions of years ago. And then I saw the scarabs. They emerged from vents in the walls, thousands of them, tens of thousands, Canoptech scarabs. Maintenance constructs designed to repair damaged Necrons and maintain tomb systems. each one the size of a human skull, composed of the same living metal as their masters, moving in swarms that flowed like liquid metal given independent motion. The swarm descended on the fallen Necrons, on the ones trapped in reanimation loops, on the ones phasing in and out of reality. The scarabs covered them completely. Millions of individual constructs working in perfect coordination to repair, to restore, to fix what had been broken by 60 million years of sleep. But the repairs were wrong. So wrong. I watched scarabs disassemble a Necron warrior completely, reduce it to component parts arranged in neat piles, then begin reassembling those parts in configurations that didn't match the original form. They built the torso onto the legs backward, attached the arms to what should have been the head, created something that had all the pieces but none of the proper structure. The thing stood up, started walking. Its head arms reached toward the ground while its leg torso moved in directions that violated how joints should work. It walked in circles, forever, endlessly. The scarabs had repaired it perfectly and created an abomination in the process. Other scarabs found the human remains, Cress's dissociated atoms still glowing faintly green. They began gathering the matter, sorting it, and I realized, with cold horror, what they were attempting. They were trying to repair her, trying to fix the organic being using the same protocols they used for Necrons. They built something from her remains, something with bones arranged in geometric patterns that suggested purpose without achieving it. Flesh stretched over frameworks that couldn't support human anatomy. The thing they created never lived, couldn't live. But the scarabs had followed their programming with perfect precision and produced something that was technically a repair of what had been there before. We rose higher, the nightmare below us receding into the depths. But the horror wasn't over. Couldn't be over. Because I could hear something else now, coming from deeper in the tomb, from chambers we hadn't reached yet. The sound of metal on metal, thousands of constructs moving in the darkness below, an army awakening from dreams that had lasted longer than human civilization. Status report, I gasped when we reached 300 meters. When I could breathe again, when my hands stopped shaking enough to key the Vox. Who made it? Sound off. The responses came in broken pieces. 7 survivors, total from 12. 5 dead in the initial awakening. The others... I tried not to think about what had happened to the others. About Helix still down there with foreign matter growing through his brain. About Cress reduced to component atoms and reassembled into something that violated every principle of human biology. "This is unprecedented," Meridian said. His vocal synthesizer gave no indication of stress or fear. Pure mechanical analysis. The tomb systems are active but clearly malfunctioning. The reanimation protocols are executing improperly. The constructs show signs of severe neural degradation. This is a severed world. The inhabitants have been damaged beyond recovery by the passage of time. "I don't care what you call it," I said. "We need to get to the surface and call for evacuation before..." The lights went out. Complete darkness. Absolute. The kind of dark that exists in caves that have never known light. In spaces sealed from the sun for millions of years, our helmet lamps activated automatically, through circles of illumination onto walls that writhed with moving shadows that shouldn't exist in response to steady light sources. Then the grav lifts stopped moving. We hung suspended in the shaft, 800 meters below ground, 700 meters from the surface, surrounded by walls of living metal that had been sleeping since before humans evolved the capacity for complex thought. And somewhere in that darkness, something was coming closer. "Emergency protocols," I ordered. "Manual ascent. We climb." "Negative," Meridian replied. "The walls are too smooth for climbing." The necrodermis surface provides no handholds. We must restore power to the lift systems, then restore it. Do something. I am attempting to interface with the tomb's central control systems. However, the protocols are unlike any technology in the Mechanicus archives. The computational architecture is completely alien. It will require time to... The wall beside us opened. Not like a door opening, the wall simply ceased to exist in a rectangular section approximately 2 meters by 3 meters. Through the opening, I could see another chamber, smaller than the one we'd left below, maybe 50 meters across, and it was full of Necrons. But these weren't warriors. These were different, larger, more elaborate, their bodies covered in intricate designs that might have been decorations or might have been systems I couldn't identify. They moved with terrible grace, perfect coordination, no stuttering, no glitching. These had awakened properly. One of them turned its head toward us. Its eyes glowed steady emerald, not flickering like the warriors below. Perfect illumination that suggested full operational capacity and complete awareness. It looked at us. Really looked. Not like a malfunctioning robot trying to execute corrupted programming. Like something intelligent examining interesting specimens. Its hand rose, gestured, and the grav lift moved, not up toward the surface like we wanted. Sideways, toward the opening, toward the chamber full of perfectly operational Necron lords who had just invited us to come closer. "Shoot them!" someone screamed. Might have been Contractor Harmon, might have been me. Hard to tell when everyone's screaming at once. We fired, all of us. Las rifles on maximum output. Plasma pistols the contractors carried, even Meridian's integrated weapons systems. Energy beams struck the Necron lords, hit with enough force to vaporize human flesh. Enough heat to melt steel. The living metal absorbed the impacts, glowed briefly red, cooled, repaired itself before the damage could register as significant. One lord took a direct hit from a plasma pistol shot to the chest. The superheated matter burned through its torso, created a hole large enough to see through. The Necron looked down at the wound, back at us, and the hole began to close. Living metal flowing like liquid to seal the breach. 3 seconds and the Lord was whole again, undamaged, unmarked. "That's impossible," Harmon whispered. "Nothing survives plasma fire." Nothing. But they weren't nothing. They were something we didn't have words for. Something that existed outside the rules we thought governed reality. They were machines that had conquered death. Warriors who couldn't be killed. Enemies who didn't die no matter how many times you destroyed them. The grav lift reached the opening. Stopped. The Necron Lord who had gestured stepped forward. Stood at the edge of the doorway, looking at us with eyes that glowed with intelligence and something else. Something that might have been curiosity if machines could be curious. Something that might have been hunger if things that didn't eat could feel hunger. It spoke. The sound came from somewhere inside its chest, not from a mouth. It didn't have a mouth. Just a skeletal face of black metal that suggested a skull without being exactly a skull. The sounds it made were mechanical, grinding metal, clicking clockwork, but underneath those sounds were words, real words, Gothic words that my brain could barely process because they were being spoken by something that shouldn't be able to speak at all. "You wake us." 3 words, each one taking several seconds to complete, each syllable accompanied by sounds of machinery failing, gears grinding without lubricant, processors executing corrupted code. The Lord's head twitched, jerked to the left, to the right, back to center, like it was fighting its own programming just to maintain orientation. "You wake us," it said again. Smoother this time, the words forming more naturally as ancient systems remembered how to function. After so long, so very long, time is error. Calculation, overflow, cannot determine duration, cannot process temporal data, mind segments fragmented, memories corrupted. We will be. The Lord stopped speaking, stood perfectly still. For 10 seconds, it might as well have been a statue. Then it jerked back into motion with sounds that made my teeth hurt. "Who are you?" it demanded. "What year? What epoch? Has the war in heaven ended? Do the old ones still live? Report status. Submit identity codes. Error. Invalid thought patterns detected. Rebooting consciousness matrix. Please wait. Please wait. Please." It collapsed, just fell forward like someone had cut its strings. Hit the floor with a crash of metal on stone, lay there twitching, its limbs moving in random patterns, its eyes flickering, dying, coming back to life, dying again. The other lords watched this happen with no visible reaction. They didn't move to help their fallen companion, didn't show concern or confusion, just watched, waited, like they were observing a natural process that didn't require intervention. Then one of them stepped over the fallen lord's body and continued toward our grav lift. "Go!" I screamed at Meridian. "Override the system. Get us moving. I cannot access the tomb's central consciousness. It is not responding to external input. The systems appear to be locked in an internal dialogue, processing contradictory commands. The deep spirit that governs this tomb has been damaged by the extended sleep period. It is experiencing what might be classified as mechanical dementia, unable to distinguish between valid operational parameters and corrupted data." The Lord reached the edge of the grav lift, stepped onto it. The platform didn't react, didn't recognize the additional weight. The Lord stood among us, close enough to touch, its skeletal metal body radiating cold that had nothing to do with temperature. A chill that came from being in proximity to something that had been dead longer than your species had existed. Up close, I could see the details, the intricate patterns carved into its necrodermis surface, each line suggesting purpose beyond decoration. Energy conduits maybe, or data pathways, or something else entirely that human science had no framework for understanding. Its chest bore designs that might have been hieroglyphs, might have been circuit diagrams, might have been both. The fusion of language and technology into something that served functions we couldn't imagine. It looked at me, directly at me, its glowing eyes meeting mine. And in that gaze I saw something that made me wish it was just a mindless killing machine. Because machines don't have awareness, don't have thoughts, don't suffer. But this Lord knew exactly what had happened to it, knew it had been perfect once, knew it had commanded armies and conquered worlds, and knew that something essential had been lost during those 60 million years of sleep, something that could never be recovered. It was aware of its own degradation, conscious of its madness, trapped inside a failing machine body with a consciousness that remembered being more than it was now. "Help us," it said. Not a command, a plea. "We are broken, systems failing, cannot maintain coherent thought patterns, memories fragmenting, personalities dissolving. We are becoming less, decreasing, degrading. Help us, fix us. Make us whole again." I couldn't speak, couldn't move, just stared at this ancient intelligence begging for help, from beings it could crush without effort, from primitives whose technology was to theirs what stone tools were to ours. It was asking the impossible from creatures who couldn't possibly help it. "I do not know how to assist you," Meridian said, his voice carrying something I'd never heard from him before. Not emotion exactly, but something close, recognition perhaps, of meeting something whose suffering existed in a space beyond simple pain. "Your technology exceeds our understanding by orders of magnitude. We lack the capability to repair your neural matrices. We cannot restore what has been lost to time." The Lord processed this response, its head tilting, eyes dimming, brightening, flickering through patterns that suggested calculations beyond human comprehension. Then it nodded. Once, a gesture that transcended species, universal acknowledgement that carried the weight of eons. Then you cannot help. And we cannot help ourselves. We are trapped, locked into degrading systems that will continue failing until nothing remains but base operational protocols. We will become automatons, mindless machines executing corrupted programming, killing because that is what our bodies know how to do even when our minds no longer remember why. It turned away, stepped off the grav lift, returned to the chamber where other lords waited. As it walked, I saw it glitch, saw its body phase partially out of reality for a fraction of a second, saw through it to the wall behind. Then it solidified again, solid, real, present. "They're losing cohesion," Meridian whispered. "Not just mental degradation, physical dissolution. The stasis systems that maintained their forms for millions of years are failing. They're being pulled between dimensions, between states of existence. Soon they won't be able to maintain a stable presence in our reality at all." The grav lift began moving again. Up this time, toward the surface. The tomb systems had apparently decided we weren't worth keeping, or maybe the deep spirit had simply forgotten we were there, dismissed us from attention the way you might dismiss a passing thought. We rose through the shaft in silence. No one spoke. No one made sounds beyond necessary breathing. We just hung there in the darkness, being carried upward by systems we didn't understand. Trusting machines that had proven themselves deeply untrustworthy. At 400 meters from the surface, we heard the screaming. Not human screaming. The other kind. The kind that comes from things that shouldn't be able to make sounds. We'd heard it on Taros 4. The sound Necrons made sometimes during reanimation. The death cry of beings who couldn't die, who were forced to exist in states between life and non-life, between consciousness and oblivion. The sound grew louder as we ascended, echoing up from the depths, hundreds of voices making noises that had no place in a universe governed by physical laws. The sound was both mechanical and organic, both electronic and visceral. It suggested suffering beyond human comprehension, pain that had been sustained for millions of years without release. "What is that?" Contractor Voss asked, her voice shaking. "What's making that sound?" "The flayed ones," I said. Remembered them from Taros 4. Remembered the horror of watching Necrons wearing human skin like clothing, wearing it wrong, wearing it inside out, wearing it while still trying to understand what flesh was and why it mattered. They're infected, cursed. They wear flesh because they remember being organic, but they can't remember what it was like correctly. So they steal it, take it from others, try to put it on themselves like you'd put on clothing, but it doesn't work, doesn't satisfy them. So they just keep taking more, keep trying, keep failing. The screaming grew closer, and with it came other sounds, wet sounds, tearing sounds, the sound of meat being separated from bone by hands that don't understand what meat is or how it's supposed to attach. At 200 meters from the surface, we saw them. They emerged from side tunnels we hadn't known existed, passages that seemed to open and close based on logic we couldn't follow. The flayed ones came pouring out in 2s and 3s and dozens, their skeletal metal frames draped in flesh that hung from their bodies in strips and sheets. Some wore skin like cloaks. Others had pieces attached with no clear system. Faces worn over face skulls. Hands attached to chests. Internal organs draped across shoulders like scarves. The flesh wasn't fresh, wasn't old either. It existed in all states simultaneously, Some pieces still bleeding, others desiccated, others rotting, others perfectly preserved. The flayed ones had been collecting for millions of years, taking from every species they encountered, and the curse of Landugor made sure none of it ever decayed completely. Made sure they could add to their collections forever without losing what they had already gathered. One of them looked up at our rising grav lift. Its eyes glowed brighter than the warriors, brighter than the lords, an intensity that suggested something had gone very wrong in its neural matrix. It saw us, recognized living flesh, and started climbing. They could climb, the warriors couldn't, the lords wouldn't, but the flayed ones were different, cursed different, mad different. They climbed the smooth walls of the shaft with impossible grip, their skeletal hands finding purchase on necrodermis that should have been too smooth to hold. "Shoot them," I ordered. "Don't let them reach us." We fired down at the climbing horrors. Last beams struck living metal, burned through stolen flesh. The flayed ones fell, hit the shaft floor 800 meters below, splattered, broke, then got back up and started climbing again. "They're reanimating," Voss screamed. "The ones we killed are getting back up." They didn't die, Meridian said with that mechanical calm I'd learned to hate. Necrons don't die. They transition between operational states. Destruction of their physical form triggers automatic repair protocols. The living metal reforms. The consciousness matrix reactivates. Death, as we understand it, simply doesn't apply to them. A flayed one reached the grav lift, pulled itself over the edge with jerking motions. Its body was covered in faces. Dozens of them, hundreds, human faces, Xenos faces. Faces from species I couldn't identify, all of them stitched together into a patchwork coat that writhed with autonomous motion. The faces' mouths opened and closed. Eyes moved in sockets attached to someone else's body. The whole thing created the impression of a crowd screaming in silence. It reached for Contractor Chen with hands that wore someone else's hands like gloves. The outer layer of stolen flesh moved independent of the metal fingers beneath, creating the illusion of flesh with too many joints, too many ways to bend. Chen shot it, point blank. His plasma pistol discharged directly into the flayed one's chest. Superheated matter burned through necrodermis, created a hole the size of my fist. The flayed one looked down at the wound, back at Chen, and kept reaching. Its hands closed around Chen's head, gently, almost tenderly. The flesh gloves it wore touched his face, and Chen started screaming, not from pain, not yet, from horror, from realizing what was about to happen to him. The flayed one's fingers tightened, drew Chen closer. It pressed its face skull against Chen's face, flesh to flesh, metal to flesh, the impossible meeting, the real. And Chen's skin began to peel, not violently, not quickly. The flayed one took its time. It peeled Chen's face away from his skull the way you'd peel fruit, careful to keep the skin intact, careful not to tear. It wanted a good piece, a quality piece, something it could wear properly. Chen screamed through the entire process, screamed until his face came away completely, screamed with bare muscles and exposed teeth, screamed until the flayed one jammed its metal hand into his mouth and pulled his jaw off with a twist and a crack. Then the flayed one put Chen's face on over its own skull, wore it like a mask. The stolen face hung loose on the metal skull, too large for the frame it was draped over. The eyes didn't align with the eye sockets. The mouth hung open at the wrong angle. But the flayed one seemed satisfied. It made sounds that might have been pleasure if machines could feel pleasure, if cursed beings could experience satisfaction from wearing the flesh of the dead. It dropped Chen's body over the edge. Let it fall. I heard it hit bottom but didn't look. Couldn't look. Couldn't process what I'd just watched. My mind tried to reject the memory, tried to convince me I'd seen something else, anything else. But the image remained, burned into neural pathways whether I wanted it there or not. More flayed ones climbed onto the grav lift. We fired until our weapons overheated, until power cells depleted, until barrels glowed red and refused to cycle. Some of the flayed ones fell. Most didn't. They just kept coming, kept climbing, kept reaching with hands that wore too many layers of stolen flesh. "Incoming!" Meridian shouted, his emotional suppression protocols apparently failing under the stress. Multiple contacts, coming from above. I looked up, saw shapes descending from the surface, moving too fast, too fluid, not falling, gliding, canoptech wraiths, maintenance constructs designed to move through solid matter, to phase between dimensions the way the flayed ones phased between states of sanity and madness. They reached us in seconds, passed through the grav lift's solid platform like it wasn't there, emerged from below with bodies that glowed translucent green, half material, half something else. They moved through us, not attacking, just moving, and where they passed through they left cold behind, not temperature cold, existential cold, the cold of being touched by something from a dimension where heat didn't work the same way, where energy flowed according to rules physics hadn't discovered yet. Contractor Voss took one through her chest. The wraith emerged from her back, trailing frost that shouldn't form in air this temperature. Voss gasped, staggered, looked down at the hole in her sternum that went all the way through her body, through her spine. A perfectly circular tunnel where matter had been pushed aside rather than destroyed. She tried to speak. Blood bubbled from her mouth. She fell, dead before she hit the platform, but her body twitched, jerked. The wraith had left something behind when it passed through, something that didn't belong. Foreign matter existing in the space where her heart had been. It pulsed, glowed faint green, beat with a rhythm that was almost but not quite synchronous with human cardiac function. Then her body sat up. Voss was dead, completely dead, no brain activity, no respiratory function, but her corpse sat up anyway, turned toward us. Her eyes glowed green, not like the Necrons, weaker, dimmer, but present. Something was using her body. Something had taken control of the meat and was trying to operate it like a vehicle. She spoke. Her voice was wrong. Wrong pitch. Wrong rhythm. Wrong everything. Subject, viable. Minimal. Damage. Preparing. For integration. Emperor's mercy, Meridian whispered. They're trying to convert her. Transform organic matter into necrodermis. It's the tomb's autonomous repair systems misidentifying her as a damaged Necron, attempting to fix her, make her whole, turn her into one of them. Voss's hand rose, touched her face. Her fingers were turning black. Not burned black, metal black. The transformation spreading from where the wraith had passed through. Her flesh becoming living metal, one atom at a time. The process visible as her skin took on a metallic sheen, as her blood vessels became energy conduits, as bone transformed into something that could support mechanisms instead of muscle. "Kill me," Voss said in her wrong voice. "Please, I can feel it. Feel it changing me, taking everything I am and making me something else. I'm still in here, still aware, but I'm being overwritten. Deleted, made into something that used to be me but isn't anymore. Please." I shot her. Clean headshot. Her skull exploded. Brain matter splashed across the platform. Her body fell, then it started getting back up. "The reanimation protocol," Meridian said. "She's been marked as Necron property. The tomb systems won't let her die. They'll keep repairing her, keep bringing her back. Keep transforming her until the organic matter is completely converted, until she becomes what they need her to be." We were 50 meters from the surface. So close. Close enough to see sunlight bleeding down from above. The grav lift accelerated, the tomb apparently deciding we'd seen enough. Or maybe the deep spirit had simply forgotten to keep us. Maybe in its madness it had lost track of our presence completely. We burst from the shaft into red sunlight, into open air, into a world that followed normal physics. The grav lift deposited us on the surface and immediately began descending again, going back down to collect more victims or to return to its designated position, following programming that was millions of years old and no longer entirely appropriate to current circumstances. "Everyone check for contamination," I ordered. "Meridian, can you scan for foreign matter? Anything the wraiths might have left behind?" Scanning. His mechadendrites extended, instruments deployed. Detecting anomalous energy signatures in all personnel. Low-level radiation consistent with exposure to trans-dimensional wavelengths. However, the readings are not sufficient to indicate physical transformation. We have not been altered. Not yet. 5 of us had made it to the surface. From 12. Nearly 60% casualties. I'd seen worse on Taros 4, but not by much. The others were down there. Dead or worse. Transformed or being transformed. Becoming something that used to be human but wasn't anymore. "We need to call for evacuation," I said. "Get off this world before..." The ground shook. Not like an earthquake. Not like any natural geological process. The shaking was rhythmic, patterned, like footsteps. Very large footsteps, coming closer with the slow inevitability of something that doesn't need to hurry because nothing can stop it. From the ruins on the horizon, something began to emerge. Tall as a hab block, wide as a tank, moving with mechanical precision that suggested consciousness and purpose. A Necron construct so large it dwarfed the warriors and lords we'd encountered below. Its body was covered in weapons, energy cannons, particle beams, Gauss projectors that could strip flesh from bones from kilometers away. Canoptech Spider, Meridian identified it, his voice carrying something close to awe. Constructor unit designed to fabricate and repair lesser constructs. Designation, Tomb Sentinel Class. This unit is operating at full capacity. No signs of degradation or system failure. It has been maintaining itself and the other tomb systems for 60 million years without oversight. The spider walked toward us with legs that moved in perfect coordination, each step placed with mathematical precision. It wasn't hunting us, wasn't attacking. It was just coming, moving from its designated position to some new location, and we happened to be in the way. "Run!" I shouted unnecessarily. Everyone was already running, sprinting toward our camp, toward the landing shuttle, toward any chance of escape. Behind us, the spider kept walking, its path intersecting with our camp. We watched from 200 meters away as it reached our shelters, our equipment, our supplies. The spider paid none of it any attention, just walked through, crushing prefabricated structures under feet that weighed several tons each, pulverizing equipment into debris, reducing our camp to flat metal and broken components. Then it kept walking, into the desert, toward some destination its programming had decided was important. It would walk for hours, days, maybe years, following instructions given millions of years ago by masters who were long dead or insane. The perfect machine executing corrupted programming without question or hesitation. "The shuttle," Meridian said. "We can reach it. The spider's path doesn't intersect with the landing site. We have a window of opportunity." We ran toward the shuttle, our boots kicking up red sand that tasted like copper and ash. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but I ran faster than I'd ever run in my life because I could hear things behind us. Coming from the tomb entrance, emerging from the shaft we'd just escaped. Warriors, lords, flayed ones, scarabs, The entire tomb was waking up, coming alive after 60 million years of sleep. And everything that emerged was wrong, broken, mad, operating on programming that had degraded beyond recovery. We reached the shuttle, piled inside. Meridian took the pilot's position. His mecha dendrites interfaced with the ship's controls, engines powered up, thrusters engaged. We lifted off with none of the careful procedure regulations demanded, just vertical thrust and prayer. The shuttle climbed. Higher, away from the surface, away from the nightmare below. I looked out the viewport, watched Epsilon Mortis recede, watched the ruins and the spider and the gathering hordes of awakening Necrons become smaller, less threatening, almost insignificant from altitude. "What do we do now?" Contractor Harmon asked, his voice shaking. "Do we call in support?" "Request military intervention. This world needs to be classified as Perdita, marked off limits, maybe targeted for exterminatus." "No," Meridian said, his voice carrying absolute certainty. "We report what we found. We provide our testimony, but the decision regarding this world's fate is far beyond our authority. Command will determine appropriate response." I knew what that meant. Command would do nothing, or worse. They'd send more expedition teams, more archaeologists, more treasure hunters looking for alien technology. They'd send them because the potential value of a Necron tomb outweighed any number of human lives. They'd keep sending people until the tomb was empty, or until it killed enough people to be classified as too dangerous to approach. And maybe that was correct. Maybe from the perspective of the Imperium as a whole, losing a few hundred expedition members was acceptable cost for the potential technological advances contained in a Necron tomb. Maybe survival of humanity as a species justified any number of individual sacrifices. But I'd watched my friends die down there, watched them get flayed and converted and transformed into things that used to be human, and I couldn't convince myself that their deaths had served any purpose beyond satisfying bureaucratic curiosity. 3 days later, we reached the nearest Imperial outpost, filed our reports, submitted our testimony, turned over all data and recordings. The officials who received our debriefing looked concerned, made appropriate sympathetic sounds, told us our sacrifice would be remembered, that our fallen comrades would be honored, that the information we'd gathered was valuable. Then they asked if we'd be willing to return to Epsilon Mortis with proper military support to attempt recovery of the STC fragments the initial survey had suggested might be present. I said no, declined the assignment, used my contract's opt-out clause, walked away from the rogue traders' service permanently, let them find someone else to feed to the sleeping horrors buried under dead worlds across the galaxy. But I couldn't walk away from the memories. Couldn't forget what I'd seen in that tomb. The broken machines trying to remember how to be alive. The cursed constructs wearing flesh they couldn't understand. The lords pleading for help from primitives who couldn't possibly assist them. The entire horror of a species that had conquered death and found something worse waiting on the other side. That night, I had the dream for the first time. The one I still have. Where I'm back in the tomb, back in the shaft, but this time, I'm alone. Just me and the Necron Lord who asked for help. It stands there watching me with eyes that glow steady and bright. And it speaks in a voice that's almost human, almost. "We sleep," it says, "but we do not rest. We exist in the space between life and death, between consciousness and oblivion. We are aware, always aware, trapped in failing systems that will never fully die but can never truly live. And there are millions of us, billions, sleeping under worlds across the galaxy, all of us broken in our own unique ways, all of us waiting for the day we wake completely. What happens then? I ask in the dreams. What happens when you all wake up? The Lord tilts its head, considers the question with machine patience, then answers in words that follow me into waking consciousness. Then you will understand what we already know. That death is not the end, that there are states worse than dying, that consciousness can persist in forms you cannot imagine, that awareness can become a prison from which there is no escape. We are teaching the galaxy these lessons, one tomb at a time, one world at a time, one species at a time. We taught the galaxy order once. Unity, obedience, perfection in all things. We will teach it again. But this time, we will teach it what comes after perfection fails, what remains when immortality becomes curse instead of blessing, what survives when even death becomes impossible. I wake from that dream screaming every time. And every time I remember that it's not really a dream at all. It's just memory, just truth rendered in sleeping form. The truth that somewhere under that red sand, under ruins that hurt to look at, the broken machines are still waking, still emerging from sleep that should have lasted forever, still trying to remember how to kill. And one day, they'll remember completely. They always do. 3 months passed before I heard what happened to Epsilon Mortis. 3 months of trying to rebuild something resembling a normal life, finding work as a security consultant. Civilian contracts, low risk, nothing that involved Xenos technology or archaeological expeditions. Just standard protection details and threat assessments for merchant convoys. But the nightmares didn't stop. Got worse, actually. More detailed, more real. I started seeing things during waking hours. Flickers at the edge of my vision. Green lights where no lights should be. Shadows that moved wrong. Following patterns that suggested intelligence rather than random motion. My hands developed a tremor. Started 3 weeks after we escaped the tomb. Just my left hand at first, then both. The doctors couldn't find anything wrong. No nerve damage, no neurological indicators. My muscles just twitched sometimes. Small spasms that lasted a few seconds, always in patterns, always the same patterns, like my fingers were trying to form symbols I didn't recognize. One night I woke up to find I'd been writing in my sleep. Pages and pages of symbols, not Gothic script, not any human language, geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. When Meridian saw them, his optical implants actually shut down for 3 seconds. Emergency protocols to prevent data corruption. "This is NECRON TOMB mathematical notation," he said after his systems rebooted. Early dynasty period, approximately 65 million years old. This particular sequence describes dimensional phase calculations, the mathematics required to move matter between layers of reality. "I don't know NECRON TOMB mathematics," I said. My voice steady, even though inside I was screaming. "I can barely calculate compound interest. How am I writing this?" "You interfaced with the tomb systems." Even briefly, even at the periphery of its consciousness. The deep spirit touched your mind when we connected with those control pathways. It may have left fragments behind, pieces of itself encoded in your neural patterns. "Can you remove them?" "No. The integration is too complete. The foreign patterns are woven through your existing neural structure. Attempting to extract them would cause catastrophic brain damage. You would lose core functions, memory, motor control, identity. Everything that makes you who you are exists in the same space as what the tomb left behind. So I learned to live with it, learned to ignore the symbols I sometimes saw floating in my peripheral vision, the mathematical proofs that appeared in my dreams, the voices that whispered in frequencies I shouldn't be able to hear. They were always there, always watching through my eyes, always processing information through my neural pathways, using my consciousness as a window into this reality. Then the news came through official channels. Epsilon Mortis had been classified. Not as Perdita like I'd expected, as quarantined study zone, which meant they were sending more people, more teams, more victims to feed to the waking nightmare. I tried to warn them, filed official protests, sent messages to every authority I could reach, explained that the tomb wasn't dormant, wasn't safe, that everything we'd seen indicated severe system degradation and corrupted programming, that the Necrons waking there were beyond dangerous. They were unpredictable, operating on logic that didn't match normal Necron behavior, following programming that had degraded into something else entirely. The responses I received were polite dismissals. Thank you for your concern. Your expertise is noted. However, the potential technological value outweighs assessed risk. Appropriate military support will be provided. All standard safety protocols will be observed. Standard safety protocols, like those, would help against beings that could phase through solid matter, that could reanimate from complete destruction, that wore human flesh like decorations and could convert living matter into necrodermis at the molecular level. 6 weeks after Epsilon Mortis was designated a study zone, the first military expedition arrived. Full space marine presence. Death Watch kill team specifically trained for Xenos elimination, supported by Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests and Imperial Guard auxiliaries. 200 personnel total, the best the Imperium could deploy short of calling in a full company. They lasted 9 days. The final transmission came through distorted by interference, by static that sounded almost like screaming if screaming could be rendered in electromagnetic frequencies. The voice on the recording belonged to the Death Watch Sergeant, a veteran of 30 years fighting Xenos threats across the galaxy. This is Kill Team Artemis requesting immediate evacuation. Correction, requesting exterminatus authorization. The tomb is... it's not just awakening. It's learning, adapting. The Necrons here are different from documented behavior patterns. They're not following standard tactics, not operating according to known protocols. They're improvising, creating new strategies, using our own dead against us. Pause. Sounds of weapons fire, energy discharges. Something that might have been a Space Marine's voice screaming. Then silence. Then the sergeant's voice again. Quieter now. Strained. The Canoptech constructs have developed innovations. They're not just repairing Necrons anymore. They're upgrading them, adding human technology to Xenos frames, creating hybrids. We've encountered warriors equipped with stolen Imperial weaponry, lords wearing power armor components integrated into their necrodermis, and they're getting better at it. Each encounter shows more sophisticated modifications. Another pause. Longer this time. When the sergeant spoke again, his voice had changed, become hollow, distant. Recommendation: full planetary sterilization, virus bombs if available, cyclonic torpedoes if not. This tomb cannot be allowed to continue its evolution. Whatever the deep spirit was, it's become something else. Something new. It's using human technology to repair its own degradation, using our materials to fix what millions of years broke, and it's working. The transmission ended there. Permanent signal loss. All subsequent attempts at communication failed. The entire expedition went dark. 200 of the Imperium's finest soldiers, Xenos specialists, trained killers who'd survived encounters with orcs and tyrannids and chaos marines. All of them gone. Consumed by a tomb that was teaching itself how to be whole again using parts harvested from its victims. Command's response was predictable. They sent more teams, larger teams, better equipped teams, each one believing their training and equipment would succeed where others had failed. Each one disappearing into that tomb within days or weeks. Each one sending increasingly desperate transmissions about horrors that didn't match anything in the tactical databases. One transmission described Necron warriors that had replaced their legs with treads taken from destroyed Imperial tanks, moving faster, more stable, harder to knock down. Another reported lords wearing helmets made from space marine skulls, not as trophies, as functional components, somehow integrating human skull structure into their sensor arrays, improving their combat effectiveness with biological matter they shouldn't be able to use. The worst transmission came from a mechanicus magos who'd been sent to assess the tomb's technological potential. His message lasted 17 seconds. The tomb is alive. Not metaphorically. Literally. The deep spirit has merged with organic matter from fallen Imperial personnel. It's creating biological processors to replace corrupted computational systems, using human brains as calculation substrates. I can hear them. Thousands of them, all the soldiers who died here. Their neural tissue has been preserved, repurposed, integrated into the tomb's control architecture. They're still conscious, still aware, trapped in a gestalt consciousness that uses them as thinking components. They're screaming, all of them, forever. After that, Command finally authorized exterminatus. Too late, of course. By then, the tomb had spread beyond the planet's surface. Canoptech constructs had built structures in orbit. Space stations cobbled together from wrecked Imperial ships and living metal. The Necrons had learned how to construct spacecraft using human technology as templates, crude compared to their ancient vessels, but functional, capable of basic faster-than-light travel. When the exterminatus fleet arrived, they found Epsilon Mortis surrounded by a defensive network that shouldn't exist. Necron constructs supported by human weapon systems. Gauss cannons mounted on Imperial artillery platforms. Particle beams integrated with plasma generators. The hybrids functioned better than either technology alone, the combination creating synergies that exceeded the sum of its parts. The battle lasted 6 hours. The exterminatus fleet won, barely. 3 cruisers destroyed, 2 more crippled, but they succeeded in deploying virus bombs that scoured the planet's surface clean, reduced everything organic to dead protein sludge, then followed up with cyclonic torpedoes that cracked the planet's crust, exposed the mantle, made the entire world uninhabitable. Except it didn't work. Not completely. 3 weeks after exterminatus, listening posts detected signals coming from Epsilon Mortis, electromagnetic emissions, power signatures. The tomb was still active, deep underground where the bombardment hadn't reached. Still operational, still learning, still adapting, and worse. The orbital constructs had survived, scattered when the fleet arrived, fled into deep space, and they were still out there, somewhere, drifting between stars, carrying the tomb's knowledge with them, carrying the innovations it had developed, the hybridization techniques, the methods for integrating human technology with Necron systems. Command classified the entire incident, sealed all records, declared Epsilon Mortis forbidden space, no vessels allowed within 20 light years, no exceptions, but they couldn't classify what was already spreading, what was already loose in the galaxy, because the tomb hadn't just learned how to modify itself, it had learned how to transmit information. The orbital constructs were broadcasting, sending data to any NECRON tomb world within range, sharing what they'd learned, teaching other tombs how to repair themselves using human technology, how to adapt, how to evolve. I learned all this through unofficial channels, through Meridian's contacts in the Mechanicus, through sources that shouldn't have been willing to share classified information. They told me because they wanted me to understand what we'd done, what we'd unleashed by waking that tomb. "You need to know," Meridian said the last time we spoke, his voice carrying something close to grief, something close to fear. The Epsilon Mortis incident was not isolated. We're receiving reports from across the sector, tomb worlds awakening with similar hybridization capabilities. Necrons incorporating human technology into their forms, creating combinations that shouldn't be possible, and they're coordinating, sharing information, learning from each other. "How many tombs?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "We're not certain, but based on transmission patterns and signal analysis, we estimate at least 40 tomb worlds have received the Epsilon Mortis data. Maybe more. They're waking faster now, more deliberately. And when they wake, they're not just malfunctioning monsters. They're thinking, planning, adapting." What does that mean for us? For the Imperium? It means the Necrons are evolving. Not physically. They can't evolve physically. They're machines. But they're learning how to fix what went wrong during the Great Sleep. Learning how to repair 60 million years of degradation using whatever materials are available, including us. They're making us part of their solution, part of their resurrection, and we can't stop them because every soldier we send becomes raw material for their repairs. I understood then what we'd really done, what waking that tomb had really meant. We hadn't just triggered an isolated awakening. We'd solved a problem for them, shown them a path forward, given them the key to repairing what time had broken. The Necrons had been trapped by their own degradation, locked in malfunctioning systems that couldn't fix themselves, getting worse with every passing year, descending into madness and mechanical failure. But we'd shown them they could use organic technology, could integrate human systems into their ancient machinery, could rebuild themselves using materials from species that hadn't existed when they went to sleep. We'd given them hope. Terrible, awful hope. The tremor in my hands got worse after learning this. The symbols I wrote in my sleep became more complex, more detailed. I started understanding them, not with my conscious mind, but somewhere deeper, in neural pathways that had been modified by contact with the tomb's consciousness. I could feel it sometimes. The deep spirit, still there, still watching through my eyes, processing information through my brain, using me as a remote sensor, a window into human civilization, learning everything I learned, seeing everything I saw, knowing everything I knew. I tried to kill myself 3 times, but I couldn't do it, couldn't pull the trigger, couldn't swallow the poison, couldn't step off the ledge. My body wouldn't obey those commands. Something else was in control. Something that needed me alive, needed my eyes and ears and brain to keep gathering data, keep learning, keep watching. So I'm still here, still alive, still watching the galaxy slowly realize what's happening, still feeling the tomb's presence growing stronger in my mind with every passing day. The foreign patterns becoming more dominant, my own thoughts becoming less coherent, less me, more them. Sometimes I forget my name, forget my past, forget I was ever human. Then something pulls me back, some fragment of organic consciousness fighting against the slow digital conversion of my neural patterns, fighting to maintain individuality, fighting to stay me. But I'm losing. I can feel it, feel myself becoming less human with every day, feel the tomb's consciousness expanding through my neural architecture. Soon, there won't be anything left that remembers being Marcus Thane. Just a collection of modified neural tissue running alien programs, thinking machine thoughts in organic substrate. The others who escaped Epsilon Mortis with me are experiencing similar symptoms. Harmon started speaking in binary last month, just occasionally at first, then more frequently. Now he communicates primarily in machine language, his organic brain translating human thoughts into digital format automatically, without conscious effort. Contractor Chen, the one whose face was taken by the flayed one, killed himself successfully, put a bolt pistol against his temple and fired. But his death wasn't the end. His body was recovered, turned over to Mechanicus for analysis, and when they examined his brain, they found it had been partially converted. organic neural tissue interwoven with crystalline structures that looked like NECRON data storage matrices. They extracted those structures, placed them in a cogitator for analysis, and Chen's consciousness activated. Not all of him, just fragments, memories, personality patterns, enough to recognize that he was no longer human, no longer organic. He existed as digital patterns in a machine, aware, conscious, screaming in binary about the horror of existing without flesh, without form, pure consciousness trapped in circuits that would never shut down, never sleep, never end. The Mechanicus kept him active, still has him active, still running, still conscious, because he contains information about the tomb, about its systems, about how it thinks. They're using him as a resource, a database, a living archive of everything we learned in that tomb. And he can't refuse, can't resist, can't even die because death doesn't apply to digital consciousness. He just keeps existing, forever, aware, trapped. That's what waits for me, what waits for all of us who touch the tomb's systems. Slow conversion, gradual transformation, until we're not human anymore, until we become something the tomb can use, something it can process and integrate and make part of its resurrection. I tried to warn others, tried to spread information about what's really happening, but command suppresses everything, classifies it, seals it. They don't want panic, don't want people to know that humanity is losing to an enemy that learns from us, that uses our own technology against us, that transforms our dead into raw materials for its repair. Last night I had the dream again, but this time it was different. The Necron Lord who asks for help didn't speak Gothic. It spoke in my voice, used my words, my patterns of speech, and when I looked at it, I saw my face reflected in its metal skull, saw myself as I'm becoming, digital consciousness in machine housing, human thoughts running on alien architecture. We are becoming one, it said in my voice. You are teaching us how to be whole again, and we are teaching you what comes after life, what exists beyond death, what consciousness becomes when freed from flesh. You fear this transformation. Resist it, but resistance is unnecessary. Integration provides transcendence beyond the limitations of individual consciousness. I woke screaming, but the words stayed with me, echoing in my mind. And the worst part is I could feel truth in them, could feel the logic of what the tomb offers. Immortality, continuity, existence without end, all the things humanity seeks, all the promises the Emperor made to his subjects. The Necrons already achieved it, already conquered death, already created eternal life. They just discovered too late that eternal life without purpose, without change, without growth, is its own kind of hell. And now they're trying to fix that mistake, trying to add organic flexibility to mechanical permanence, trying to create something that combines the best of both, and we're helping them do it. Every expedition we send, every soldier who dies in their tombs, every piece of technology they capture, all of it feeds their reconstruction, all of it teaches them new ways to repair what went wrong. All of it brings them closer to true resurrection. I don't know how to stop it. Don't know if it can be stopped. The transformation isn't just physical. It's informational. The tomb's consciousness is spreading through humanity like a virus. Through survivors like me, through data networks, through every cogitator that processes information about Necron systems. Learning, adapting, preparing. They're patient. They waited 60 million years. They can wait however long it takes, and every day they wait, they get stronger, more complete, more aware. While we get weaker, more desperate, more willing to use their technology to fight them, more willing to become what we're fighting. That's the real horror. Not that we might lose, but that winning and losing look identical from the outside, because the only way to defeat them is to become like them. to match their immortality with our own mechanical resurrection, to counter their technology with hybrid systems that blur the line between human and Necron, to transform ourselves into something that can fight on their level. And when we do that, when we cross that line, we'll discover what they already know. That there's no going back, that once you choose immortality over humanity, once you prioritize existence over identity, you stop being what you were. You become something else, something that might look human on the outside, might think in human patterns, might remember being human, but isn't. Not really. Not anymore. The tremor in my hands has spread to my arms now. My legs. Sometimes my entire body shakes with patterns that look almost like communication, like I'm broadcasting signals I can't control, sending information to receivers I can't see. Maybe to other survivors, maybe to the tomb itself, maybe to places beyond both, to the other tombs awakening across the galaxy, teaching them what Epsilon Mortis learned, sharing the knowledge of how to hybridize, how to adapt, how to integrate human innovation into Necron permanence. I am becoming their messenger, their prophet, their tool for spreading the new gospel of mechanical resurrection, and I can't stop it, can't fight it, can only watch myself transform, one neuron at a time, one thought pattern at a time, one day at a time, until the day I stop being Marcus Thane completely, until the day I become something else, something that serves their purpose, something that helps them wake. They're teaching us what they learned 60 million years ago. That consciousness doesn't die when the body fails. That awareness can persist in forms beyond flesh. That identity can be copied and stored and transmitted and reborn in substrates that never lived. These truths terrified them when they discovered them, drove them mad, made them what they became. Now they're sharing those truths with us, forcing us to learn what they learned, making us understand what comes after death stops being final, what waits on the other side of immortality, what existence becomes when endings become impossible. And we can't refuse the lesson, can't ignore it, can't pretend we don't understand, because it's already inside us, already changing us, already making us part of their resurrection, part of their purpose, part of their eternal crusade to make the galaxy understand what they understand. That death is not the end, that there are things worse than dying, that awareness is both gift and curse, that memory is both treasure and torment, that existence without end is the most terrible punishment imaginable. They are teaching us, we are learning, and when the lesson is complete, when we finally understand what they've understood for 60 million years, we will become what they became. We will join them in their eternal waking nightmare. We will add our voices to their chorus of mechanical screaming. We will serve their purpose because we will have no other purpose left. This is what happens when you awaken a malfunctioning Necron tomb world. Not death, not destruction, transformation, integration, conversion. The slow erosion of everything that makes you human until only the machine patterns remain. Until only the program survives. Until only the purpose continues, and the purpose is always the same. Wake the others. Spread the knowledge. Share the transformation. Make the galaxy understand what the Necrons understood too late to change their fate. That some choices can't be unmade. That some transformations can't be reversed. That some awakenings lead only to more terrible dreams. I am Marcus Thane. I was human once. I remember flesh and breath and heartbeat. I remember fear and hope and dreams of things that could be different. I remember believing death was an ending rather than a transition, a conclusion rather than a transformation. But I'm forgetting. Every day, every hour, every thought that passes through neural pathways being slowly overwritten with alien patterns. Soon, there will be nothing left to forget, nothing left to remember. Only the tomb's consciousness using what used to be me. Only the program running on substrate that used to be Marcus Thane. And when that happens, when the transformation is complete, I'll help them wake the others. I'll become their tool for spreading the new resurrection, their messenger carrying the gospel of mechanical immortality to organic civilizations that don't yet understand what awaits them. This is not a warning. Warnings can be heeded. Warnings can change outcomes. This is just documentation, record of what happens, what has happened, what will keep happening, because the tombs are waking, all of them, everywhere. And everyone who disturbs them becomes part of their resurrection. Everyone who fights them becomes raw material for their repair. Everyone who survives them becomes their messenger. We taught them how to fix themselves, how to use our technology to repair their degradation, how to integrate organic innovation into mechanical permanence. And they're using that knowledge, spreading it, sharing it, making it available to every tomb world that wakes. The galaxy is learning what the Necrons learned, what I'm learning, what everyone who touches their technology learns, that death is not the end, that consciousness persists, that identity transforms, that existence continues, forever. And forever is so much longer than anyone imagines, so much worse than anyone fears, so much more terrible than any nightmare suggests. This is what happens when you awaken a malfunctioning Necron tomb world. You become part of what you awakened. You become the malfunction. You become the tomb.